Great. I just heard that to our remote participants that we have very tough competition in Geneva for presence. Today is UN Bazaar, where it's an event at the UN's headquarters, where you have all countries presenting their food and what you can also buy jewelry and other things. And I realize that we have really tough conflict, but we will think of something more attractive next time. We have now quite big presence in our online room, and we will start our monthly briefing, as always, as a summary of the main developments during the month of November. As you know, the month of November has been extremely busy with quite a few important events, and we will start now by basically going through our barometer. Next one. Good afternoon, Nigel. And you got the printed version of barometer, as always, the summary of the major developments with indication comparing to the previous month if we have increase of the relevance or decrease, or it remains equal. And we'll go step by step through all major developments. Next. Next, please. Okay, here is just the summary of the main events that happened in November. I will just indicate a few highlights. One is World Radio Communication Conference, which was held here in Geneva. Extremely important event, rather low profile when it comes to the public visibility, but highly relevant for mobile telecommunication, and we had just-in-time training prior to the event. Of course, Internet Governance Forum in João Pessoa in Brazil between 10th and 30th of November. It was a highly important event. G20 Summit in Antalya, which brought quite a few interesting decisions. I'm just trying to pinpoint a few highly important events. At the end of this week, there will be CHOGA meeting in Malta. CHOGA stands for the Commonwealth High Officials Head of Governments meeting. Thank you. And it is held every 2 years. The last one was in Sri Lanka. This one is in Malta. Probably the internet won't be the high on the agenda, but it will be definitely one of the topics related to development inclusion. And we will now go through the major developments in November. Please, next. Okay, when it comes to the global IG architecture, the main process is obviously WSIS+10, a review process on the World Summit on Information and Society. And currently, we have the draft outcome document, which was published. The government sent their comments. And right now, there are so-called informals in New York, where the governments are negotiating basically the draft and hopefully final version, which will be offered to the WSIS+10 meeting in mid-December. I tried to consult a few colleagues from New York and ask if they can expect the white smoke today from the UN, and they told me that it is not very realistic. Therefore, we can expect last-minute negotiations before the December meeting, which co-facilitators try to avoid. And there were some hopeful signals during the IGF that we could have avoided that, but the negotiation will most likely go till the last moment. You will see in the briefcase you have the updates about developments at the IGF. At the IGF, WSIS+10 featured very high at the first 2 days when the stage was set, and the more IGF was progressing, the less the relevance for WSIS+10 was made. There were more focus on data protection, on cybersecurity, and other specific issues. There was an interesting link which was developed between WSIS+10 and SDGs, especially SDG 9.c, which calls for the access to the internet. And the discussion was centered around the key message that technical infrastructure is important, but not sufficient in famous truism, condition for the access to the internet. One needs a legal context, social, economic skills, and broader development in order to have a full access to the internet. On the future of the IGF, there were two issues. Was the question of the prolongation of the mandate of the IGF, and it is more or less agreed. There are modalities. if it is going to be, and there was a question of the length of the prolongation, whether it is going to be 5, 10 years, or indefinitely, most likely indefinitely won't be adopted. The question was also related to modus operandi, and here we had an interesting development. IGF realized that it has to have some outcomes. In the Article 72 of the Tunis Agenda, it is indicated that IGF can produce, when appropriately, an outcome, and so far IGF community considered that it wasn't appropriate, but from the last IGF, in intersectional session activities, IGF community started producing various outcome documents, including good practices. Therefore, there is a move in that direction. Whether it is going to be sufficient, whether it is good enough as it is indicated by some proposal that there should be official recommendation coming from the IGF is the open question. And it was discussed during the IGF. Therefore, we will be seeing more developments, most likely even in versus plus 10 documents along these lines. Barometer can expect the increase in pressure, especially during the month of December and the mid-December negotiation in New York. Next. The second question, which featured really highly on the various meetings during the previous month, is the question of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity was high on the agenda of G20 meeting in Antalya, Turkey. And here we have what we discussed during one of the events last week here at the platform. We have some sort of customary law in making. For those of you who are lawyers online or here in the room, there is a clear trend that the rule that countries should not use the data gathered through the surveillance for sharing with the private companies. That rule is gaining momentum. It was adopted first in bilateral agreement between China and the United States, then between China and the UK, and it got endorsement in the final communique in Antalya. Therefore, it is in a way a rule in making that surveillance shouldn't be used by governments for the gains of the private companies. At the IGF, there was a recurrent theme on the cost of cybercrime strategies, the question of pervasive encryption aimed at protecting privacy or less encryption. And since we will be coming back to this balance between, on one side, encryption, surveillance throughout our summary today, I'd like to ask Arvind to click to triangles, please. Well, you know, you're familiar now with the famous triangles. Next one, Arvind. Okay, you'll have now to. Okay, that's fine. This triangle was underlying during the IGF in João Pessoa, having essentially question of business and economy and development, overall development at one corner, having the human rights discussion related to privacy, freedom of expression on the other corner, and having cybersecurity. And if you really analyze carefully transcripts from the IGF, you know that IGF produces detailed transcripts of what was said. You can see on many points discussion on how to establish the right balancing act. Are we having more, do we need a more sort of encryption to have a more security? And this is very interesting discussion, which was triggered also with very unfortunate developments in Paris. Do we need a more or less encryption in order to ensure the security of society? And many commentators argue that there is a need to have a less encryption in order to have more security. But then there was an interesting statement of the Computer Association, United States ICT Association, which basically gathers the main internet companies from Silicon Valley, who argue differently, argue that we need a more encryption and more protection of data in order to have more security. Therefore, that debate in this triangle will be one of the vital debates of digital policy. Do we need more encryption or less encryption? Does it lead to more security or less security? General security, not only cyber security. Therefore, this triangle with the topics which are on the side dominated IGF discussion and also current discussion, especially after the Paris attack, the question of security, human rights, encryption, and related issues. Arvin, please back to our presentation. Next. Next question was IANA transition, and here we have that ICG, the coordination group for IANA transition, completed its work, and there is one outstanding question: is the question of accountability. As you know, that there were two tracks. One track is the question of the management of the names, protocols, and numbers, and the sort of supervision of that work, and it is finished. But the other question was the question of accountability, and it is still open and it is still discussed. At the IGF, ICANN, interestingly enough, didn't feature very prominently or very highly in discussion. There was it was mentioned in two contexts. One was the question of jurisdiction. Should jurisdiction be shifted from California to some other place? And there was a more or less agreement that the current, at least in the current situation, the jurisdictional basis in California provides more stability for ICANN. And there was a question of engagement and trying to ensure diversity. ICANN. There was one interesting statistical data that, as you know, the CEO of ICANN should be elected in mid-2016, will replace Fadi Shefadi. And there were 100 candidates, quite an attractive position. And there are only 7 applicants, only 7 female applicants. Therefore, we may expect the first UN Secretary General to be female at the end of 2016, but we'll most likely wait for ICANN CEO to be female for some time. I don't know if those 7 ladies will manage to get forward with their candidacy. Next. Yeah, this is the question of the candidacy, the question of new domains. New domains discussion was relatively quiet, and as you can see, we put it lower pressure. There was one issue that after the safe harbor agreement, but it is a rather technical issue, that European-based registrars complained that they can lose their competitive advantage because of the subsidies for escrow providers in Europe may be dropped. So basically, they can be on disadvantage comparing to US-based registrars. Next. Online privacy, data protection, highly important issue. And that was discussed in European Parliament. There are follow-ups to, and the European Parliament argued in its resolution that the means and tools for data protection and privacy are not sufficient. And they even called to allow the freedom of movement of Mr. Snowden, to have him basically co-locating even in some European state. There was a safe harbor agreement discussion where the European Commission tried to provide some alternative tools for providing de facto protection that safe harbor agreement provides. As you know, during the previous month, during the previous briefing, European Court of European Union declared the current safe harbor agreement legally invalid. Therefore, there is a huge problem what to do with the traffic of data across the Atlantic Ocean. And the European Commission suggested a few legally technical tools that could help in derogation, commercial agreements that could help with that. Another big issue was the question of trans-Pacific trade deal, trade arrangement, which introduced new developments when it comes to copyright, privacy, and e-commerce. And as you know, the civil society groups criticize it heavily. IGF 2015 focused on privacy, and there was an interesting statement by the new rapporteur on privacy who said that people need safeguards without borders and remedies across borders, arguing basically that protection of data protection and privacy must be global. It cannot be just restricted on the national level, also because of the nature of the internet. Here we have, there was one interesting session on discussing interplay between freedom of expression, freedom of information, and privacy. And the argument was by two UN rapporteurs that in order to ensure the freedom of expression and freedom of information, you need more privacy, and you need eventually more encryption as a tool for providing privacy. You can find the links for all sessions in the summary. Next. Well, net neutrality, back to Facebook, and the discussion on the Facebook Internet.org project, or Free Basic, which is now relabeled. Facebook announced that they will start deployment of Free Basic in African countries as of March 2016. Mr. Zuckerberg was in India, where we had the strongest opposition to Internet.org. Basically, just to provide the context for those who are new in discussion, Facebook is providing limited services for a free, usually with telecom operators in developing countries, restricting access to obviously Facebook websites, very often Wikipedia, but not complete internet. And it is considered to be infringement of the principle of net neutrality. This service is called zero rating service. Mr. Zuckerberg went to Delhi. He addressed the technical community over there, and his answer was that anyone can develop any solution or the software on the Internet.org platform. Basically, he said, okay, forget the rest of the internet, but on our platform you're free to develop whatever you want. Which is a tricky argument, and we can expect more and more sort of tension around that. Mobile industry and GSMA, as one of the leading representatives, was also quite critical on the net neutrality movement and proposition, and siding more with the sort of differentiated services. Now, at the IGF 2015, we had even the protest of the local civil society, and the UN had to intervene, and I'm sure that you follow the developments. As you know, the question of net neutrality is a very important issue in Brazil. There is a lot of policy discussion, there is a lot of energy, a lot of passion when it comes to discussion on the net neutrality. And it was somehow transferred to the IGF because it was hosted in Brazil. And the question was basically started as a protest, and we were following very carefully how it evolved. But then some people came with the legitimate arguments, arguing that concern of the net neutrality communities, who argue that everybody should have access to the full internet, could be sometimes, if not cynical, at least questionable. And the counter-argument is, who can argue for people who do not have access to the internet in India or Africa, and Facebook comes with some access, that access is not good enough because it doesn't cover full internet. Therefore, there was very interesting discussion, more shifting from, let's say, black and white arguments, zero, positive and negative, good and bad guys, into more nuanced debate. What is realistic, and what we expect that IGF will probably start facilitating, and it will probably facilitate a deeper discussion on the question of net neutrality. Because the real question is, if Facebook comes to the local community or refugee camp somewhere in Africa, and people who do not have access, and offer them access, is the net neutrality argument strong enough? And this is the real sort of serious debate which we'll have ahead of time. There was discussion on the net neutrality in Russia, for example, where the Russian Orthodox Church announced that it will start Wi-Fi, a Russian Orthodox Church Wi-Fi, which will facilitate access only to clean internet, for the restricted internet. And there are now more and more proposals along these lines, and I can see that November and this autumn showed us strong shift towards fragmentation of the internet. from different directions, from corporate, from state, from religious in this case. There are more and more shifts towards fragmentation of the internet. Next. Thank you. The question of jurisdiction, the main development was the order of the French Belgium court, which basically requested Facebook to stop tracing the users who are not the Facebook users. They argued if somebody subscribed for the Facebook, for using the Facebook, it is fine to trace that person if it accepted the rules, but Facebook cannot trace. If it is doing now through cookies, it cannot trace the users which are outside the Facebook. And they threatened them with a fine of 250,000 euros, daily fine. There is now the process complained by Facebook expected to appeal. At the IGF, we had a discussion on the US jurisdiction over ICANN, and the jurisdiction has been coming more and more as a sort of horizontal issue, like net neutrality when there was discussion of data protection, privacy, e-commerce, intellectual property rights. And even discussion about digital legacy, which was my favorite session at the IGF. What happens with our data when we move from the earth and we pass away, and what is the status of our data with Facebook, Twitter, and other documents? And it's not that simple question. It has a philosophical aspect. Should we just remove all traces of our work? Is it legal aspect? Who can have access to our data? Is it the family? All sorts of personal and legal successors. And it was probably the most interesting debate when it comes to the new issues, and jurisdiction, question of jurisdiction appear in that discussion as well. Next. E-commerce is the biggest worry for business leader is Uber syndrome. According to the study of the leading companies, Fortune companies worldwide, they consider the question of the Uberization of the economy as the biggest worry, because the traditional business model which those companies use is challenged by Uber's model of the new type of intermediaries. Therefore, it is considered the biggest risk and threat for the traditional companies. At the IGF, the discussion was on how to renew this economic dynamism, innovation, reduce the risk of suffocating the sort of this economic dynamism of the internet, the question of taxation, fiscal policies, interplay between cybersecurity, human rights, and internet business that we already discussed in this triangle. You can find all of this information on that digital watch with more details. Next. I think that's all. Arvin, please, next. Up. Okay. Main events in December. Afrinic Regional African Meeting in Congo. There is the World Telecommunication ICT Indicators Symposium in Hiroshima. GSMA Mobile 360 Europe. Geneva Engage will have a consultation meeting on 7th and 8th December. IT Kaleidoscope, Trust in the Information Society in Barcelona. High-level VSIS review meeting, which is the main event of the UN General Assembly, 14th, 15th. And you can go down the list with the two ITU workshops, WTO Ministerial Conference, and the IEEE meeting in Kyoto. The December, as it is expected, with the exception of VSIS Plus 10 meeting, will be a bit quieter than November when it comes to various digital events and developments. Therefore, what could be some sort of underlying theme of the month of November, if we have to summarize in a few tweets? First one, dynamism on the VSIS Plus 10 on the global architecture, which will be decided in December for the next most likely 5 to 10 years. Discussion whether the more encryption means more security, especially after the Paris attack, and that discussion will be with us for a long time, unfortunately. There is also the question of privacy protection and freedom of expression. That balancing act, how to combine two, discussed mainly here at the UN Human Rights Council. And the new developments related to human rights, for example, Nauru was criticized during Universal Periodical Review for the censoring access to the Internet. And the Internet has been relatively quiet in Universal Periodical Reviews at the Human Rights Council, but it is now entering this space. Well, that is more or less all for, Teresa, have I missed anything? Time for questions, comments. We don't have today Richard Hill with us to ask the first question, but we will have some volunteers.
No, thank you, Jovan. Just Nigel Hickson from ICANN was wondering whether he can update on the next step of IANA transition.
Fine, please go ahead, Nigel.
You can hear me. Thank you very much, Jovan. Just wanted to mention that on the IANA transition, as you say, there's still some work being taken forward on the accountability proposal. A summary was issued last weekend on the 15th of November on progress since the Dublin meeting, and a full report, a so-called third proposal on accountability is being launched on the 30th of November. This is the sort of final public consultation on the proposal, which is also going to the various organizations in ICANN for approval, and will hopefully enable the proposal to go forward with the transition proposal, which is already agreed to the US in the middle of January. For the consideration of the US administration and for discussion in Congress. So hopefully everything will be on track then for the completion of the transition towards the autumn of next year. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nigel. If you please stay with us for a few minutes. We just mentioned this statistic that out of 100 candidates for the position of CEO, we have 7 ladies. Is it also statistical likelihood that we can have a next CEO being a lady? Is it 7% statistical likelihood, or you expect higher chances to have the lady as the head of the ICANN?
Well, wouldn't it be nice? Yes, I mean that would be fantastic. So 7%, yes, a bit disappointing. There we are, but 7% is better than sort of 2 or 3%. As I understand it, a short list has been drawn up of perhaps a dozen or so candidates, and they are being interviewed or whatever, and we hope to have an announcement in the new year at some stage. So Fadi carries on till the end of March.
And Fadi, if I'm correct, will be on the 1st of December at the UN for a briefing with Latvian mission on the question of IANA transition.
That's right. The Latvian mission are kindly hosting a briefing to missions, and that will primarily concentrate on the IANA transition and the implications of that. On the 1st of December, on the 30th of November, he's addressing the heads of the different UN agencies in a closed meeting. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for keeping the tradition of providing updates for our monthly briefing. Yep. Now the floor is open for questions from our remote participants and colleagues here in the room for questions or comments. Okay. This is the first. Just introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Jovan. My name is Christiane Roy. I'm with the Canadian Permanent Mission. I was curious to hear your views on, you mentioned that the informals were not likely to produce the white smoke. What happens if we don't manage to come to an agreed text by the 14th of December? What happens to the process if there's no agreement on text at that time?
Well, this is really a good question that we should have tackled probably next week in more details during the VSIS briefing. But as you know, in the UN, probably the way out is the least common denominator, which could be expected as more diluted text referring to agreed text, which is already accepted in previous documents, which would be, I would say, less favorable outcome, because we expect something which could be more proactive, setting the stage for the next 5 to 10 years. That's probably the let's say the fallback position whenever you have this type of complex negotiations. And there was some hope after the IGF and corridor discussion, that we may have the sort of solution today, basically, because informal should end today. But as we have been hearing from New York, it's very likely that it will continue till the meeting itself. And it will also change the nature of the meeting itself. It was supposed to be more sort of exchange of views and more sort of global brainstorming about the ICT. When it moves to the negotiation speed, obviously you have different atmosphere and different setup for the overall meeting. But still we are here in the crystal ball exercise, and we have to see what will be happening. Okay. Do we have any comment from online community? Mm-hmm.
Yes, in part, I guess this question was covered, but Amrita Choudhury from India is asking again, what can we expect from the WSIS first time December discussion? So maybe we can bring another twist in addition to that in general.
Well, what we can expect based on the last year briefing with the Ambassador Yanis Karklis is that there are quite a few agreements and common position, and when it comes to the link to SDGs, development aspects, and differences which we have to see if they are going to be serious enough, related mainly to the question of the interplay with the international law, the question of jurisdiction, territorial integrity, the question of the need for the extra mechanism or body to regulate the internet governance issues on the global level, as it was proposed since very beginning by group G77 in China. Is this solution, could this solution be found in strengthening the IGF and adding some sort of additional mechanism in the IGF, or not? Or is there a need for the additional mechanism? That's probably the most controversial issue, related to the line that various stakeholders should be participating in the digital policies in their respective roles and responsibilities. This is the key line of the tourist agenda. What does it mean in practice? Respective roles and responsibilities is the issue that they are negotiating now in New York.
Thank you. Another question from Bishar Tarazi. What to expect from the IGF MENA conference, which is going to take place in Beirut in December, as we didn't mention it in the briefing.
Well, I don't know details, but I can, if there is sort of, it was 11 years ago when the WSIS preparatory conference was held for MENA countries in Beirut, and for the first time the question of internet governance was brought into discussion. Therefore, there's some sort of a spiritus loci that the discussion at the IGF MENA may bring some new issues. As you know, during the WSIS process, there was no discussion on the question of internet governance for a long time, and then after the Beirut meeting, after preparatory meeting of MENA countries in Beirut, it led towards the adoption of the establishment of the working group on internet governance and discussion on internet governance. In the first phase of the WSIS process, internet governance was the big elephant in the room. Many delegations were pointing, but there was no open discussion on that. And then in Beirut, there was discussion, and after that, internet governance came into the mainstream towards Tunis and the establishment of Internet Governance Forum. That's the only speculative historical answer that I can give, but I don't have any more details about, unfortunately, about IGF MENA. We may hear from the colleagues from the region. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you remote participants for your active participation. Thank you for your presence today here in Geneva. Please join us online with the reporting which is going on the Digital Watch GIP platform, where you can find detailed updates on daily basis about the latest developments, and also summary of the main developments, information about major actors and other activities. We will be providing reporting from the WSIS meeting in New York. Therefore, there will be like IGF Daily from Internet Governance Forum, Geneva Pessoa. We'll have also WSIS plus 10 Daily from New York. Therefore, stay tuned and follow these developments. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon and enjoy the UN Bazaar. I may just go across the street and see what is the offer there.
Enjoy.
Selling Canadian maple syrup. What else? What are the other highlights? What about UK? Scones. Okay. European Union? Okay, it's a sort of European. Okay, Iranian pistachios. They are always excellent. Okay. Okay, with this comment on the lighter note about what's going on at the UN Bazaar, I would like to conclude this month's briefing. And ECU for December, we won't host the in situ briefing because of the holidays, but we'll have an online briefing for the colleagues in Geneva and online community. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.